It is with so much pleasure that I introduce to you our guest today, composer, conductor, orchestrator, musician, Mr. Tom Kitt. Tom is awarded the Tony Award for Best Original Score and Best Orchestrations, as well as the Pulitzer Prize for Drama, with his musical co-written with Brian Yorkey, Next to Normal. Tom also composed the music for Broadway's High Fidelity, Bring It On the musical in collaboration with Lin-Manuel Miranda, and If Then. He orchestrated and arranged the music for Broadway's American Idiot, Everyday Rapture, Spongebob SquarePants, Head Over Heels, and Jagged Little Pill, as well as NBC's Grease Live and Rise. His scores for Shakespeare in the Parks, The Winter's Tale, All's Well That Ends Well, and Cymbeline, and Manhattan Theater Club's From Up Here garnered him Drama Desk Award nominations. And Tom also wrote the music for Disney's musical adaptation of Freaky Friday, as well as the adaptation of the 1993 film Dave. Tom received an Emmy Award as co-writer with Lin-Manuel Miranda for the 2013 Tony Award opening number Bigger. His new musical Superhero, co-written with John Logan, premiered at Second Stage Theater in 2019. And that same year, he is very busy, his new musical adaptation of Almost Famous premiered at the Old Globe. Tom's current projects include a stage adaptation of The Visitor and his new musical Flying. Help me welcome Tom Kitt.
Hi.
Hi. Hi.
Very happy to be here.
Oh man, we are delighted. You have a great group of people on this call here, and I see a couple of composers as well. So I hope that they are loaded with questions, because you know I am. Yeah, when I was sitting down to think through yesterday, what I wanted to talk to you about, I got to tell you, it was both easy and hard. And the ease was due to your versatility. And because like there's so many things, there's so many ways to come at questions because you have done so much and you have had a piece of so much of, I mean, truly Broadway history at this point. But it was also hard because we only have an hour to share with you. So I had to manage myself. And what I didn't know, Tom, was that you went to Columbia College for economics.
I did, yes.
And I don't know if there's a story there. I didn't Google search this, but when you first went to school, what was your intention?
I was really excited to be in New York City. My big dream at that point was to become a recording artist in the mold of Billy Joel and Elton John and Bruce Springsteen, Paul Simon. Those were kind of my heroes. I started playing piano, doing like piano vocal nights at a bar called the West End Gate. And, but I didn't know necessarily what a music education was going to do for that, or whether if that didn't work out, I wanted to continue to go into music and potentially teach, or in any case, my father is an economist, and he suggested the major, and I didn't really have anything else that I was passionate to do besides music, and it felt like a practical major, and so I decided to try it, and I really, really enjoyed it. I mean, it was very intense, it worked very hard, but I learned a great deal, and I learned a great deal about human behavior, and that was very important for me as a writer, to consider people's choices and moods, and just how the intersection of life in cities and in terms of tastes and preferences, how all of that comes together. So certainly if I look at music like If Then, I think it might have been born out of that experience, but mostly it was just an opportunity for me to just challenge myself in a major that at that point was outside of my expertise. I didn't really study that in high school, and be surrounded by a lot of really smart driven people to learn from them and to develop a work ethic. And at that point, when I started that major, I also started working on the varsity show with Brian Yorkey. So suddenly theater became a part of my landscape and a new dream to write for the musical theater. And I continue to feel like the economics degree, even though it wasn't necessarily rooted in musical theater, was just creating. It was challenging me, and it was keeping me sort of active around campus and in discussion. And I just was learning a great deal from those classes, from the people and professors that I was surrounded by. So I really think that at the end of the day, pouring yourself into any kind of education, anything that's going to challenge you and really provoke you to think about new ideas and a new way to look about the world is going to be helpful no matter what it is you eventually end up doing.
Yeah, you're so right about that. I mean, I look at my stepkids now and they're so fixated on what's my major going to be. People care. I need to declare my major. And I'm sure there's some truth to that because I think it does help you stay focused. But I think expanding your mind is expanding your mind.
Yeah, absolutely right. And I don't have any regrets about it. I wish I had taken a few more music classes that I found would have been helpful to have expertise in as I was beginning my career.
Yeah.
The biggest sort of challenge came when I got a job offer to work in the financial sector and had to make this choice when I graduated school, whether I would take the more uncertain path and follow my dreams of being a musician versus, as what seemed at that point to be a much more stable path. And I just knew that I was never going to regret giving music a try, but if I had taken the job, I would have always had regrets. So I followed my heart, and it was hard. The life of an artist, as we all know, is a hard path, but so worth it. And I never looked back.
Wow. How'd your dad feel about that?
My parents were extremely supportive.
Yeah.
I think my father, to his credit, was supportive, but also said, just, you always have to make sure that you're serious about whatever it is you're doing.
Right.
And he just wanted to see me not just suddenly get that wasn't going to give me an excuse to kind of sit around and write a song here and there. And I really was serious. I sought out opportunities. I continued my piano studies. I looked to be involved with not just things that I was writing, but opportunities to learn about orchestration, to play in pits, to be a rehearsal pianist, to musical direct. So I was trying to take on as many different jobs as I could that was going to feed not just my career, but again, the expertise that I had. Because you always learn no matter what environment you're in. And all of that came together and allowed me to pursue this career, not just as a composer, but as an orchestrator, as a musical supervisor, as an arranger. So it really, I point to all of those experiences to say that they had a profound effect on where I am today.
Right. Well, and to that, you were such a damn talented composer. And I am fascinated by your continuing to work very successfully and on a consistent basis as an arranger, an orchestrator, and sometimes that is your job description. And so my question to you is, what is attractive about that job description that does not necessarily include by billing? I know a lot of this is billing conversations too, but doesn't necessarily include the composer billing component.
Well,
what's attractive about
all about creation and creativity, and you want to be in a special room with people you're going to learn from, people perhaps you've idolized, been inspired by. I've been lucky because as soon as someone mentioned American Idiot or Jagged Little Pill or Spongebob and that group of artists, or the Go-Go's, these were all people I dreamed of working with. And it's a new creative hat, but it's no less challenging. It's just a different way to think, but it's writing and thinking outside the box and bringing new ideas to the collaboration. And because those artists, for the most part, are off being rock stars and doing, very time-consuming things, I really was in the room kind of speaking as the composer, not at the expense of who really was the composer, but someone has to be in the room proposing ideas, finding a way to create a form of a song or an arrangement of a song that then will go to the composer for their input and approval. But you need a music person in the room when these things are happening. And I never think so much to say that I know 100% I will always have the right answers and that I can just go about and do my work. I have to be in communication with those artists. But you develop a trust, you develop a process, and along the way in all of those shows, it felt really easy. And for me, I was like a sponge. I just was constantly learning.
Yeah.
There were songs from American Idiot that influenced my writing in Next to Normal. Alanis is constantly inspiring me as a writer. So I get a lot out of it. And again, I just want to be in exciting rooms where the art that's being made feels very cutting edge, feels of the moment, feels like it's going to speak to people, feels like it might be doing something a little different. So that's always, the way I wouldn't necessarily take on every idea to write a score for. It's the same thing with orchestrating and arranging.
Right.
It has to be the perfect marriage of what you bring to it and what the story is going to bring to you.
Right. And you've worked with some fabulous lyricists, and a couple of them are long-standing relationships. And I'm embarrassed that I don't know this answer, and I hope you'll forgive me. Do you ever write your own lyrics?
I do. I did when the singer-songwriter dream was born. I wanted to write songs, and I was writing music and lyrics. Getting into theater, I learned, the hard way, really in college with Brian, that there was a lot that I needed to learn if I was ever going to attempt it. And I was so happy to take a back seat and just watch Brian and just sort of be blown away by his his voice and his talent, his humor, his wit, and also the way he can be devastatingly human.
Yeah.
And as you said, I've worked with, Brian, of course, who's my soulmate. And I talk about us as like the garage band of theater. We dreamed in college that we'd be on Broadway one day. Then written with Amanda Green, Lin-Manuel Miranda, of course, Nell Benjamin,
and Dave, right?
Michael Corey now on Flying Over Sunset. So I've worked with extraordinary lyricists and learned a great deal. And then I finally felt like with Superhero that I wanted to take a crack at creating my own score, because it was a very personal story, a story I wrote for my kids, was feeling a lot about the world and about the dangers of it. And I wanted to sort of give this hopeful love letter to my children that was going to also have some darkness and some, unsettling themes in it for them. I have to say that show has taken on a whole new life in the current state. I'm actually working on a track by track synopsis of it for Playbill, just through the songs, and it's amazing how those songs are speaking to me now in a whole new way.
Yeah.
Where we are, but so I still feel like I have a lot to learn about it, but I love doing it. I've co-written lyrics with Cameron Crowe. So I like to do it, and I also realize that there are shows that I wouldn't want to do it on, that I would really want to work with someone and get their expertise and their voice.
Yeah.
So it just has to be the right thing.
Right.
But when I do it, I get great satisfaction out of it, and I also have the utmost respect for what it is to be a lyricist, because lots of times you can sit down and hammer out a piece of music, but you can find yourself sitting for hours with two lines that are not quite right.
Right. No, for sure. I mean, I feel that way dramaturging something, so I hear you on that. You said something that made me want to ask this other question. I'm going very rogue on what I wanted to talk to you about. When you sit down to write and you're scoring, this question sounds so like clinical and like too simple, I suppose. But I'm always curious with writers of your caliber, like when you first sit down to score story and characters' voices, where do you start? And of course, the source material, right? But like, how are you looking at the soundscape when you're first beginning to find the voicing?
Well, if I'm sitting down just on my own, without any sort of lyric, I look really to the dramatic moment. What's the state of mind of the character? what do I think the song is going to want to begin as? And I'll usually start vamping on something and then seeing if that leads me somewhere. But it's really about serving the dramatic moment and what's going to be the music that is going to really start to lead me down that path. And usually it's pretty fast and furious. One thing will kind of lead to another, and soon I'll have a piece of music. Sometimes I'll walk back to that piece of music and not love it as much as I did when I sat down and played it, or I will start to vary it and create a new form of that music.
Right.
But so music comes pretty easily out of a dramatic moment. And if I'm writing lyrics with that music, sometimes they both come together. A phrase will just come out of the music, and I'll think, well, is that a dummy phrase, or is that actually something that might illuminate the moment, and do I build off of that?
Right.
If it's a lyric first, then the lyric will usually create some kind of rhythm, and I'll start to just imagine the scanning in my head, and that rhythmic line will then start to find itself into a piano accompaniment of some kind.
Yeah.
Usually it'll bring out a very specific melody. But I remember so many of these moments. Like I remember sitting down with the opening number of If Then that Brian sent. It was just, I think, 2 stanzas. And it just started right away. I just heard Adina's voice in my head. And it just flowed.
Right. Right.
So for the most part, I just find that I can get into an inspired state, and it might not be the right thing, and I might throw it away or change it, but it's just getting again into the mode of what you're trying to say musically, lyrically, and what the music really has to convey. And then there are songs that obviously have bigger scope. If you have an opening number, if you have a big sequence, they'll take it a piece at a time, unless Brian, say, has mapped out the entire thing, and then I might try to just do the whole thing in one fell swoop. So it just depends on how long you can keep your juices flowing.
Right. This crazy time, we're all in. Love the basketball hoop. I hate to draw attention to it again. It's just like from this perspective, it looks very small. Is it very small?
It's a smaller hoop. Yeah, it's for a smaller basket.
So you had 3 shows that were either in production and production had to stop. One show you had that was just about to start previews. Is that right?
Yeah, so Jagged Little Pill had been running since early November. Flying Over Sunset was scheduled to 12th, which was the night of the shutdown.
Right.
And then The Visitor, I believe, was scheduled with its first preview March 24th.
Yeah. Can you tell us a little bit about Flying Over Sunset and The Visitor, in case folks haven't read up on it? I feel like they're like first here.
Sure. Flying Over Sunset is this really interesting story that James Lapine dreamed up and brought Michael, Corey, and myself together to write with him. And it's basically set in the 1950s. And these 4 very interesting, remarkable historical figures, Clare Boothe Luce, Aldous Huxley, Cary Grant, and Gerald Heard, were all somewhat connected to one another. And they were all experimenting with LSD. And this was in the 50s, before the psychedelic age and Timothy Leary, and when this was being prescribed by psychiatrists as a means of psychotherapy, and so they've all it's chronicled their experimentation with the drug, including Cary Grant, who gave this very off the cuff interview, I think in the Ladies' Home Journal, and was very candid about his use of the drug. So James has just always been fascinated with this history, and so the first act, you kind of pick up on each character as they're at a certain point in their life, a turning point. Cary Grant has just retired from the movies. Clare Boothe Luce has just been offered and then turns down the ambassadorship to Brazil. And Aldous Huxley, his wife Maria, is sick, and people are sort of starting to take shots at some of the ideas in his books, and especially as it comes to the experimentation of these hallucinogenics. So So in the first act, you pick up on all of them. The end of the act kind of brings them together, and then in Act 2, they all decide to meet at Claire's rental in Malibu and experiment on the drug together. So it's a really interesting trajectory. I learned a lot about the history, and it was a chance for me to write a score that is I think for me is very different. I mean, you will hear certainly it's me, and you will hear the echoes of me if you followed the work I've done, but it is there's not a rock pop bone in this entire score, and it was really exciting to get to write that sensibility. And Michael's lyrics are just gorgeous. Working with James, I've learned a great deal. It's a wonderful company and team of designers, and of course Lincoln Center is just dreamy to be at, and to be with Andre and Ira. And they believe in the show from day one, and have been the champions of the show. So I'm hoping that we've been pushed to the fall. I'm hoping that will happen.
Yeah.
The Visitor is a very different story. It's based on the Tom McCarthy film from 2007 about two undocumented immigrants who are living in New York, and they befriend a white male economics professor who discovers them at sort of a sequence of events that has them thinking they can sublet his apartment, but he ends up inviting them to stay, and they develop a friendship through music. The young man from Syria is a djembe player, and he sort of awakens Walter's sensibilities and his lease on life, because his wife is deceased, and he's kind of sleepwalking through life at that point. So this new relationship with Tarek and Zainab is kind of awakens Walter, and then sadly there's a downturn to the story as Tarek becomes detained, and it's certainly a very timely story, but it's just a beautiful story about how we connect, how we need to see each other all as one, and it just begs for humanity to champion one another, lift each other up through connection, through music, and just celebrate how we are all one, and we have to take care of one another. And the rhetoric on the other side of that is just so disheartening and just hurts my soul. And so I wanted to create a story that hopefully galvanizes people and makes people realize that this is as important an issue as there is in the world, and that we have to protect one another.
Yeah.
And so it's got a wonderful cast. Ariel Stachel, who won the Tony Award for The Band's Visit, David Hyde Pierce, Jacqueline Antaramian, and Alicia Deslera, who just came through the cast in February. It's a beautiful quartet, and then a brilliant, wonderful company who are all playing musical instruments in the show. So really, music is the lifeblood of this story.
Right.
And Dan Sullivan and Kwame are beautiful book writer, and of course Brian Yorkie, who I created this musical adaptation with. It's our score, and it's wonderful to have a new Brian Yorkie, Tom Kitt score that's coming into the world.
Yes.
And so I'm desperate for it to happen, but of course there's so much going on. I mean, the set is there, but there's going to be a ton for the public theater to figure out about their schedules, about getting things up and running. But these two institutions, Lincoln Center and the Public Theater, are just great institutions. Doing important work. They have so much support, and I have no doubt that they will weather this and find their way back. And I just want to be as supportive as I can. Never mind The Visitor and Flying Over Sunset. These are my families, so whatever they need from me to be a voice that will help galvanize people and bring everybody back when we're ready, I want to be there. And they've all reached out to me in such beautiful ways of support and love, and I'm just so grateful. So I want to pay them back with shows that I hope speak to multitudes of people for many years to come.
Oh gosh, that's beautiful, Tom. I feel like I have a clicking on my screen. Is that my
I
screen?
had a phone that was on, so I just turned it off.
Oh, what was it?
I had a message come up, so I
Oh,
forgot to
don't
turn
be sorry. No, no, no. I feel like I'm like, is someone working in my office? And
it off.
well, you sort of answered the question I have to that. And I know it's a question that we're all asking each other, as both, I suppose, a challenge and to inspire. It's certainly a conversation that I know everyone who is on this Zoom call is engaged in as well. And it's what have we learned in this period of, yes, isolation, but for most of us, fairly extreme mindfulness, because you have yourself and you have your family and you have your four walls and you might have the grocery store and a walk in the park, but like it really forces you to go very internally and question your life and hopefully look on the other side of this and implement some new ways of thinking and new ways of approaching work. But what you were saying just now really spoke to that. I have a feeling you live your life like that anyway. You're such
Well, I
a
think as an artist, that's your daily existence. But the difference is the daily existence of art, as we knew it before we were in this, was always fraught and but joyous, and you felt like you were in a hopeful, safe space. And certainly, I remember plenty of times where I saw a New York Times headline and my heart sank over something that was going on or something that was said, or just the way people are dealing with one another.
yeah.
The horrible events that unfold, and I have to pull myself out of that to get back to writing. This has been something that it's constant, so it's very hard to pull yourself out of it and feel positive. And some days I wake up, I feel great, and then the anxiety and the uncertainty starts to settle in, and it just becomes very, very difficult to sit down and write something. So I don't know. I know that we definitely want to put a positive spin on things as well as we can, because it's what we need.
Mm-hmm.
And there have certainly been moments of, I'm sure we've had them, of family time, of connection over these months that have comforted us. But the cost of that has been, especially for all of us in the theater, has been so great. And I know for me, yes, the pace is fast, but the fast pace makes me appreciate the slow pace that I then earn, and they can both be part of my life. And I see the loss that my children have during this time. My son was supposed to graduate from 8th grade. That's going to be virtual. All these shows they were supposed to do, the question of summer camp, and the question of the fall. And so I have a hard time going to at least I've gotten to do this, because I feel like all of that could have happened in the period I was living in.
Right.
So I go more to, okay, we have to go through this. We have no choice to go through this. What are we going to be coming out of this? What is this going to mean for policy? What is this going to mean for scientists going forward? What does this mean for the other catastrophe waiting, which is climate change? What does this mean for how we look at globalization and how we as countries see one another as we're all in this world? How do we work together? How do we work that we are all looking out for these things and helping one another to deal with them so that they don't happen again, that we're communicating, that we're not in competition, because these scientists, I mean, God bless them. And I was sort of talking to someone the other day about that period of the 60s when you had the Beatles and the Rolling Stones and the Byrds and Bob Dylan. They were all making these albums that were feeding off one another, and you feel like that's what's happening. Like all these scientists now have free reign and support because everyone desperately needs them to succeed. But it can't just be during a pandemic. You know, they've been silenced from sitting at the table.
I know.
And even now, the regulations that are being thrown away. So, you know, one instance you say, okay, there's this, I guess, silver lining that the emissions have gone down as human activity has stopped, but that's not sustainable for when things start up again. So what are we doing to make sure that our children and their children, even the latter parts of our lives, because we feel it now, that we're going to deal with this, and we're going to let the experts help us deal with it. So that's the thing that I'm most concerned about. You know, I have to get to the other side of this. I have to stay positive. I have to try to create art that I think is speaking to the moment. I think a lot about the Bruce Springsteen album, The Rising, and how that album was so important to me after what we'd experienced here in New York in 2001. And I think a lot of what I'm in right now is my own version of that.
Yeah.
It's something that speaks to the moment, hopefully celebrates humanity and what's to come. But I think we're in a moment right now, and it's especially going to be on the young generations who are graduating, you know, who are coming into their own, that to be involved and to really to take this moment on, so that we have a future that is not going to be what is the next big thing, but it's going to be, we've been working for years in advance, and we're ready for the next big thing, and we know that this is going to be sustainable. You know, we in the theater, we are always trying to think of cutting edge, new, innovative ways to tell stories, to write, to connect with one another.
Yeah, especially now. I mean,
and if we were, and that's the way you move the needle forward. But if you were involved in an industry where it says, no, we don't want any of that. We want just what's always been. Right. Even if that way is harmful, even if that way is out of date, even if that way is not really going to sustain and find people new livelihoods, you know, we need someone who is really forward thinking and has imagination. That's what I'm desperate for. Imagination. We didn't have the imagination to see this. So imagination is going to be the big word coming out of this. And for me, and I hope that's, people are going to seize on that.
Right. Oh, so well put. Relatively soon, I'm going to back to questions here. So if you have a question for Tom, you can go ahead and raise your hand. I see I have some hands raised. You also score a lot of plays. I mean, I don't know that there's a lot that you don't do. I'm sure you have a secret in there. Do you dance? I need to catch you on something that you're actually not.
I don't dance. I wish I could dance because I see all those brilliant dancers. I am actually, though, recording an album for Sony Masterworks, so I do get that. I'm getting that dream to come true of being a recording artist. So
I love that.
Yeah, that's exciting.
When you're scoring a play, Tom, with having the play to read and then also being in the rehearsal rooms, they're two very different experiences. What do you find more useful in the beginning of that process of scoring a play?
The most important thing is to sit down with the director and go through every moment and find out, get a sense of what kind of music they're looking for and how long they think it's going to be. Is it transitional? Is it underscore? Is it a song potentially? So the plays that I've scored at Manhattan Theater Club for Liz Flahive, who I adore, were smaller. I think From Up Here was maybe a one act, and I think the second play was The Madrid, and I think that may have also been a one act. So there were maybe between 10 and 15 cues for those plays. Orphans on Broadway, 2 acts, but I think it was all told a fairly short play. So that ended up also being about 10 or 11 cues. And most of those cues were transitional. So I could just write a piece of music, try it out on Dan. Dan Sullivan had a specific mode, a tonality he wanted. He wanted it to feel like 1970s punk. So so that was fun, especially again, coming off of American Idiot. But then I've done 3 plays at Shakespeare in the Park, and those average between 40 and 50 cues. And it's an enormous amount of writing, and it's big transitions, dances, songs, underscore, openings, finales. So it's that's quite an endeavor. And before I started, I'm just always like, how am I going to do this? Like
I changed my mind. I don't.
It's just so gargantuan. But then you sit in rehearsal. A lot of what I do is I sit there and I try things out on the spot. And I look over to Dan, and Dan just kind of gives me a nod. That seems like the right place to go. And I flesh it out on my own. And then I score it out. Two of the plays I did, Cymbeline and The Winter's Tale, which I did with Michael Greif, I had live instruments. So that was fun to do, to have an actual ensemble on stage. And then All's Well That Ends Well, I recorded.
Uh-huh. Wow, cool. Well, if anyone who didn't know this, you know now from listening to Tom for this half hour, but you're an incredible educator. And I always think about that story with Jalen, Josie, and
Uh-huh, uh-huh.
like hopped into Spongebob,
Yep.
which is it's just so incredible to me. You know, people's careers start by way of mentorship. They just do. Somebody gives you a chance. And I'm curious who your mentors were and are.
A few. Janine Tesori.
Mm.
Janine went to Columbia and worked on the varsity show as well. And I just remember we were able to get her to come see the show that Brian and I wrote, and she stayed in touch with me and gave me some great advice. She told me I should take my resume to the stage doors, just hand them out, see who was looking for rehearsal pianists. And the Nathan Lane, then Whoopi Goldberg production of A Funny Thing Happened on the Way to the Forum, and the Nell Carter production of Annie, they both call me in to just sort of, I don't know how much work I did, but it was just so great to know that that could actually happen.
Yeah.
Janine's always been a good friend and someone who's given me wonderful advice. Jason Robert Brown, he hired me as his associate conductor on Urban Cowboy, and then I did an industrial with him and 13.
Yeah.
I learned a great deal from Jason about process, about the meticulous nature with which he writes and scores his music. And we're great friends. We also love to play the piano. So I got to do a subculture concert with him a couple of years ago, which was a blast.
Yeah.
But I've just learned a great deal from Jason. Alex Lackamore, someone else who we orchestrated High Fidelity together, and just watching his work ethic and his process, knowledge of finale, and just again the meticulous nature with which he notates and writes piano parts. That was a huge influence on me. Hal Prince always gave me the most important advice. And I'll never forget, after High Fidelity sort of opened and closed, he sought me out and just talked to me about things he had gone through in his career and how it was important to keep going and have a meeting on your next show the day after the previous show opens. Just make sure you're always moving forward.
That's great advice.
Yeah. So Hal, Stephen Schwartz, someone also who's just always made it a point to seek me out and give me great advice. So, I mean, there's so many people. I'm sure if I really did the thought process, but certainly those groups of artists early on. And another shout out I have to give is to Amanda Green, because she opened me up to this world of cabaret and Broadway performers. Which helped lead me to the world of Chick-a-Boom, working with Mario Cantone, doing concerts with Norbert Leo Butz and Sherry Renee Scott and Greg Naughton, Michael Cerveris, Adam Pascal, and accompanying Alice Ripley for the first time. That was everything for me, because suddenly I was getting musical directing jobs. I was learning on site the way to accompany, the way to sort of just be in the world. Brooks Ashmanskas, Jonathan Zakuchit, some of the people that I was working with at that time.
I know Brooks Ashmanskas would love that he got a shout out as a mentor.
He really was, because someone else that I just have to give the greatest shout out to is Daisy Prince, because Daisy's been a close friend. But she's also someone that if you've ever been in the room with her and seen her work with young artists, you learn so much about the business, but also just about these songs and what they mean, and how to investigate the lyrics, and what a theater song, no matter what the style, what the function of it is, just when it succeeds, what it offers you. It's a masterclass every time I'm in the room with Daisy. So I just jump at the chance, and I just can't say enough about what I've learned from her.
Oh, that's fabulous, Tom. I'm going to open up to questions now because we have several. Elliot has a question.
Hello.
Hello.
Hi. First of all, hi, everyone. I'm a big fan of your work, Tom. So I work now as a dramaturg and an actor, but when I was first falling in love with musical theater, orchestration was sort of my big pipe dream. And one of the things about your work in Spongebob I am most struck by is how you were able to take songs from a number of different songwriters with really distinct styles and sensibilities, make them seem like they fit naturally in the same world. So I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about your orchestration process for that.
Well, I think I had to do two things. I had to honor the honor all of these artists. I mean, they all have different sensibilities and styles. So the worst thing for me would to have been to take them and try to put them in the same tonal place. You know, Aerosmith, John Legend, Plain White T's, T.I., you know, on and on. They're just different, unique, spectacular. They have to feel like the songs have to feel like it's their sensibility. But at the same time, I have to be investigating how the writing around it, whether it's orchestration, vocal arranging, or even how I take the themes in these songs and bring them back in transitions or underscoring, is making this feel like a score throughout. And that's really what a musical theater score does to me, is it tells a musical theater story. It underscores all of the moments, whether they're songs or transitions or musical sequences, but these themes tell the story of your show all night long. And there are plenty of shows where we've seen people write in very different, distinct styles, song to song to song. But they always feel like a score. So I just said, this can work. It doesn't have to be one writer, as long as everything is pulling together, telling the story in its own way, and then we find a way to identify those themes that all night long will continue to put this musical material into the storytelling. And Kyle Jarrow and Tina Landau were incredibly informative and great guides to do that. And we just tried anything and everything. And I think because you hear that Tomorrow Is theme, you know, the finale of the first act, that it keeps coming back to have emotional content, or Simple Sponge, it's doing what musical theater scores do. So the cohesion to me was never going to be all these songs feel like they come out of the same vein, but it was going to be all these songs feel like they're carrying the load and working together to tell the story, and they don't take you out. It feels like a constant build of storytelling.
That's a great question you had, Elliot. It was actually one of my questions I had for Tom that I didn't get to. Thank you for that.
Thank you. Oh my God.
Haddon has a question.
Okay. Hey there. Long-time listener, first-time caller. I love that you've written and orchestrated in like so many styles. It's always seemed like you've just been so ambitious, but you definitely seem to challenge yourself to enter like new musical or storytelling territory from project to project. So I'm just curious, what's left for you to be terrified of? Like, where does that ambition want to lead you? Like next, is there a musical style or genre of storytelling you haven't tackled yet and just can't wait to get to? I'll take my answer off the air.
Wow. I think I would be somewhat terrified to orchestrate for like a huge orchestra. You know, if someone gave me a 50 to 100 piece orchestra and said, we want you to do this, just so many musicians and so many colors. And my biggest, I orchestrated Grease Live was 35 pieces, but you know, again, it's a rock pop score. So to write something that for that number of pieces, I mean, would be thrilling, but I think it would be terrifying in a good way. I also think probably writing an opera, which is something that I've wanted to do, that would be somewhat terrifying, but thrilling to do. So yeah, I think those are probably the two things that most come to mind. But I think with every project I go down, I was terrified of Almost Famous, and it was just so thrilling to do. But you're living in a world of classic rock music, some of the most iconic songs, and you have to both live in those songs and create new ones, and make sure the camera crew is happy and everyone's happy and that the story is being told. There's a lot of love for that story and people feel ownership over it. And not so similarly, but I think you could put it in the same sentence. High Fidelity was an attempt to create a musical theater score that touched on styles and motifs and songs that would be recognizable, and it didn't go down in the way that I hoped it would. So I approached Almost Famous just with a little bit of, I hope that people receive this in the way that we're all feeling it's happening in the room. And thankfully, at least in our world premiere, it was a totally different reception, and people really got it and loved it. We had Joni Mitchell there at opening night, and she said to Cameron that she just loved it, which was a huge, huge compliment. So I just think you're always terrified.
That's great. You're always terrified.
Thanks, Haddon. Haddon's a fabulous composer and sound designer here in town.
Wonderful.
Pamela has a question.
Yes. Hi, Amanda. Hi, Tom. Thanks so much for being with us. I was thinking through your wonderful shows, and I was just struck by how they're so thought and conversation provoking, and in so many ways they illuminate issues that are in the shadows many times. With Next to Normal, you made a broader audience think about mental health, and If Then is sort of a universal experience of every human wrestling with life choices and the role of fate, and et cetera. Jagged Little Pill, I unfortunately haven't seen yet, and The Visitor, obviously, no one has. But I love that you are motivated to create art that is speaking to the moment. And I just wonder what, if anything, has been percolating in your brain during this time. I know you've got projects on the burner and waiting to happen that you're probably thinking a lot about. But is there anything that's been going on during the time of quarantine that has made you think about creating something out of this experience? And then what is that process? How do you turn your ideas into these works? Right now we're dealing a lot as artists with feeling the need to create our own content because there's nothing that is able to be done out there. And I just wonder how you approach creating new work.
It's a really good question. As I said, the writing, the creative process is very challenging right now because I think we all feel that uncertainty, and there's times that you just don't feel motivated. And I've spoken to a lot of my colleagues, and we're all going through the same thing. But one of the first things, sort of breakthroughs, was a story to create something about this moment right now, especially this moment living in New York City. So I do have a project that I'm very passionate about that I've started to develop, and it's going to be set in New York City during quarantine. And but it's going to be a romantic story. It's going to be a truthful one. It's going to try to speak to what we're feeling and seeing. But it's amazing when you look out the window at 7 o'clock and the people are applauding the healthcare workers and essential workers, and you just notice the people who are here, who are in their windows, who are cheering. There are some young kids, there are parents, there's people filming it. You're just very taken with the New York street scene that you're seeing right now, and it's just very evocative. Who's still here and how we're banding together and how we're keeping our spirits alive. So I think that there's an opportunity for me to write about that, and it could be cathartic and it could be hopeful, and I think that's what we do. That's what artists do. There were these articles about Shakespeare during the plague, and Hemingway went through the pandemic, and so I think we have to just keep chronicling the time. For me, it certainly felt challenging to pick up things that I started before this, because it's just such a different memory and feeling. So in some ways, it's been easier to hit reset and just say, okay, I'm in this mindset. What am I going to make out of this? And even that can be slow going, but I do feel like there's an urgency to tell a story like this right now, especially for my kids. Again, I wrote Superhero for them. I feel like this is going to be for them because we're all trying to figure out how we connect at this time, how we feel comforted, how we can, especially if you're young and you're seeking a real emotional connection with someone, but we're not able to be in the same space. how do we do that? What is intimacy going to be at this time? I met my wife in college, and if suddenly I was trying to get to know her and to court her in some way, going through this, what would that be? What would that tell us about ourselves? People getting married, people having babies. I mean, life is going on, and so I want to speak to that life going on and create something that's hopeful about hopefully where we will get to, what we will have learned and experienced, and how it will give us gratitude and, as I said, make us stronger.
Thank you.
Thanks, Pamela. Camilla has a question.
Hey guys, can you hear me?
Uh-huh.
Oh, good, great. Okay. My question had to do with, I know, Tom, you said early on when you were kind of first starting out in New York, Janine Tesori had you taking resumes to stage doors, and I thought that was so cool. But I was wondering if there was anything else when you were first starting out as a musician and a writer that you did that you were really glad that you did, and if there's anything that you wish you hadn't done around that.
Well, I did the Be My Musical Theater workshop, which was huge, and that's where Next to Normal started. So that was a wonderful discovery. I went and I musical directed Hair at the Actors Theater Louisville, one of my first professional jobs, which was a blast and showed me the magic of being in a company, and really getting a chance to investigate a show and see what new colors you could bring out of it. John Jory, who had directed it, found some ways to frame it, with the approval of the authors, and it was interesting to me. It opened my eyes about how to go about something and just put your creative hat on and see how something that exists in the world can speak in a new way. I guess some of the things that I probably didn't need to do, I would get calls from some I don't know whether it was a show like an off Broadway show, or some vocalist who needed an accompanist, and the project just was not really something I was interested in, and I wasn't going to be making a lot of money, and I started to dread having to show up at rehearsal or show up to the gig, and just think that yes, you need to earn money, but you also really need to do a cost-benefit analysis of what you're really going to be getting out of this. I mean, is someone really going to be there that you're going to get to meet, and it might springboard you. And sometimes those things were promises that there's this really important person, there's this record executive person, they're going to be there, it's going to be a great opportunity for you, and of course that never happened. So I think I just had to be a little more, I had to do a better vetting of some of the gigs that I took on that really didn't do much for me and ended up just being frustrating and kind of soul-sucking.
Awesome, thank you so much.
And I think we all could use a little more vetting, couldn't we? We have 2 more questions, if you don't mind. I know it's too late.
Of course.
Casey has a question.
Hello, can you hear me?
I can.
Awesome. Hi. Thanks, Tom, so much for spending your time with us today. I have the unparalleled pleasure of working a ton with new musical writers here in Atlanta. And the question that I get a lot is, after they do a bunch of staged readings, what's next? Like how do I take this to the next level? How do I get somebody to produce it? And I'm just kind of wondering, from a person who has had so many wonderful productions, what advice you would give to someone who's got this musical, has gotten some feedback, but needs to kind of widen their circle?
Well, I think that you can either apply your project to places like New York Stage and Film, or the O'Neill, or Sundance Lab, try to get someone to take you into a development process where there are going to be people coming to see your show from the industry. And it could also, just being accepted to them gives you really strong accolades and will be attention grabbing for people in the industry to say, oh, these are the musicals that are happening this summer. I'm going to want to go see that one. So If you're not going to go that route, then the question is, how do you get eyeballs on your work to take it to the next level? So I think that you have to get to a point where you go from internal development of your stage reading to a presentation where you're able to get some people to come see it of importance, because those are going to be the people that are going to then come on board and finance the next stage, which is, you know, a workshop, and you start to look towards a production. So for us with Next to Normal, for example, we had the Village Theater in Seattle that was a huge champion of the work and was getting us out there. We got into NYMF. We had Shikaboom do a concert that Sherry Renee Scott and Norbert Leo Butz starred in. So there we had fans and people working for us who were finding their own ways into entertainment. And you just have to work every resource you have. And if you think the piece is ready to be seen, then you have to really mobilize all those resources and find a way to get them all into the room to see your work, and then have a conversation. And hopefully that conversation will be, we love it, we want to get involved, and here's how we see going the next step.
That's awesome. Thank you so much.
Yep.
Christian has a question.
Hi, can you guys hear me?
Uh-huh.
Hi, I'm Christian. I have a fun fact and a question. Everybody kind of took the good questions, but fun fact, I was actually the music production assistant for Pitch Perfect 3. So I didn't actually get to meet you, but I got a lot of your work through email. It was totally connected to you through that way.
Amazing. That's great.
So I have a question specifically about, just orchestrating, and I guess really when it comes to Spongebob, just in terms of unifying the sound, like Elliot was saying, how long did that take? What did that process kind of look like? And were you able to work on other projects while you did that?
So SpongeBob, I started working on SpongeBob in 2013, summer of 2013. That was our first presentation. And the way the music came in, we got mostly demos, and they were all varying production levels. So there were demos of just someone sitting at a piano doing a scratch track. There were Panic at the Disco did a full produced demo. John Legend just did himself in real time. I think on tour it was a beautiful, heart-wrenching performance. I think that Steven Tyler may have sang over a voice memo in Italy, sort of like you could hear all the city happening behind him. So it was really up to me to sort of take all of that and then create the arrangements out of that. And of course, as the songs were beginning to evolve in rehearsal and vocal arrangements came into play, different vocal types singing the songs, there was a fair amount of work to just get it into an arranged form that would both be guided by what I had received, but also have to evolve. Jonathan Colton's brilliant opening number, Bikini Bottom Day, there was all this new material that was thrust into the middle of that. And with Jonathan's blessing and working with Tina and Kyle, I just kind of, took what I think was initially maybe a 3-minute demo that then became, an 8 or 9 minute opening sequence.
Wow.
The They Might Be Giants, brilliant song, I'm Not a Loser for Squidward. I think we got 2 verses from them, just piano vocal. And then that whole dance arrangement happened with Chris Catelli in the room. It was a new thing. So I had a lot of creative work to do, but I had to make sure that I was doing it being guided by the songs. And the process really from rehearsal to orchestration, I think was 3 or 4 years. So those songs were evolving in the room. I orchestrated them for a small band. I had a bass, guitar, keyboard, and drums at one point. So that was a great discovery. I think that happened maybe in either 2013 or 2014. So I had a bit of a head start, but it took 4 years of really developing that material in the room, talking with Tina, who had really wonderful, passionate ideas about the music. And then I went off and just sort of created the first round of orchestrations. And we continued to vet them in Chicago, and then of course for Broadway we changed them. So it was an ongoing process, but because I was able to be in rehearsal from the beginning and really a part of the development of the score and get to hear all these demos, I felt like I was always really following the right path, and the feedback I was getting was really important and guided the process. So it was a gargantuan task, that many brilliant artists to have to create a score from, but they were wonderful and supportive, and I think they all, as we all feel, like getting invited into a theater experience is unlike anything, and it makes you feel alive in a whole new way, family that you didn't know existed.
Awesome. That was a great answer. Thank you so much, Tom.
My pleasure.
Tom, thank you for this time.
My pleasure. It was my great pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, for sure. And thank all of you for joining us. I hope everybody has a great weekend and does something nice for themselves and reaches out to someone maybe who needs it over the weekend. We'll see you soon.
See you very soon. I look forward to it.